Are we going to be okay? Can we do this?
This is a lot of Aries.
We have stamina now. This mental passion is inside of you.
There's magic in that, and feeling that, embodying it and merging with it.
Dusty back there and blah, and I'm leaving them behind.
We don't do sun sign astrology over here. Is that right?
Hi, everyone. It's Meredith, your evolutionary astrologer. And today we have such an incredible video for all of you. I cannot wait for this video. I am here with my special guest, Cawnawyn Moore. We are going to talk about 4 incredibly powerful and transformative transits that are coming up this spring. Don't miss this. Get out your pen, piece of paper to take notes, because you are going to need to write these dates down as they are so big. But right now, I want to say hi to Cawnawyn. Thank you for being with us.
Meredith, thank you so much for having me. This is such a pleasure. I'm really excited to talk about, wow, what a spring we have. This is awesome. Thank you for having me back.
You are so welcome. And you are such a love, and you are such a bright and just a bright, shining light. And I think our dialogue is just going to be fascinating. So I can't wait to talk about it. We're only going to do 4. Now, there are plenty more transits that we can talk about, but Cawnawyn and I decided that we would, blast off with these 4 because these are biggies. And I really think 2025 is a pivotal year for us.
I have to agree. 2025 is shaping up to be wild. A total rebirth. I've been branding this year as a rebirth for pretty much all of my classes I've been giving. So really stoked to talk to you today and really get into the nitty-gritty of like these transits, because they're incredibly pivotal and hold a lot of magic.
Well, let's start off with Venus going into retrograde. Technically starts on March 1st, but we could also talk about it. The pre-shadow of it starts on January 28th, which is an interesting day because that's when the nodes, the mean nodes, change signs. January 28th is going to be cataclysmic.
And I think what's so interesting, we'll see this as a theme recurring, but so many of these transits, I think, have days that match with another occurring transit. So a lot of these days hold, I think, so much power because it's not just one change, but it's like setting up multiple. So we have this shift of the nodes setting up for us this incredible journey we're all going on with our Venus and how it's going to operate on a collective level at the same time. And then we see that cascade effect through all of March with these other dates that get lit up.
So it's kind of like a 10-layer cake, there's multiple layers to it. So I love that you said that. And one of the things that I would like to tell my audience or remind my audience is that Cawnawyn is an eclectic witch and she works with magic. And so I kind of want to invite her to share with us a little bit and expand our hearts and our minds and take us into your world of magic too, with these transits, if you will, because it's kind of exciting. Like, would you be willing to share with us, Cawnawyn?
Of course, I am happy to. That is why I want to bring all these stories. And so much of magic, I think, has to do with the story and the magic of like these deities, these powers, these archetypes that operate within the chart. And that's so much of my focus and my practice. So I cannot wait to bring that element to this as well. Thank you for having me share some of that.
Well, and so this is Aphrodite, and the goddess of love and beauty, peace and harmony, and it's going retrograde. And when Venus retrogrades, it goes within, right? And it sort of deconstructs in order to reconstruct. By the way, one thing that I want to say just on a very pragmatic, practical note is I don't recommend between March 1st and April 12th. And if we really want to talk about it in the shadow, January 28th, all the way to May 15th, but that's a long time. But I really say between the 1st of March and April 12th to not start a new relationship. Do it either before or after, because love is very elusive under this particular retrograde. There's a trickster element inside of Venus at this time. And I find that like you don't get the whole story, like the hot cop forgot to tell you that he was also married when he hit on you. So that's just the pragmatic world. I don't really recommend having your first date or your first romantic meeting under Venus in retrograde transit. Saying that though, do you have like love potion number 9 in your back pocket, Cawnawyn?
I don't even know of love potions right now. Like this particular Venus retrograde. So I love that you brought up Aphrodite. And if we think about sort of the Aphrodite backwards, right? That reconsideration, all those great retrograde words. How do we work with her energy in a way that is very reflective and internal? Because that's really what we're being invited to do. And then also thinking about the Aries, that she's going to go retrograde through Aries and go back into Pisces. And this actually really brought up the myth of Inanna, the goddess Inanna, and her descent into the underworld. She's stripped bare completely, and she has to like go through this entire rebirth cycle. And Venus is going over our 0 degrees Aries point of this like zodiacal birth. And I really look at this retrograde as an opportunity for us to strip away that which we do not value, which we do not find important, and to step into a rebirth of like, well, what am I ready to now manifest? How would I like to spend my energy? So as much as love potions might feel, in fact, with Venus being so close in our solar system, very like tempting, I really encourage people to do that inner work of like, how can you be reborn and strip away what we do not find important, what you don't want in a relationship anymore? What is stripping you of your energy?
Yes, that's great advice. Okay, so no love potion number 9, but one of the things that I love that you touched upon is sort of reworking not only the meaning or the meaning or the concept of beauty, but self-love, self-worth, and our value. And I also think in the shadow side of this aspect, I think Venus in retrograde is sometimes a step back in time. And sometimes it's a step back in time in order to propel yourself forward. Meaning, I think this is a time for real reflection of what were you once willing to accept that you now no longer are willing to accept as part of your value system, your own self-worth, maybe even a job that you take, something that you were willing to do back in the day, you're no longer really finding the meaningfulness in that work anymore. Or maybe you're not willing to take a low wage anymore. Maybe you're demanding an increase in your value, in your worth, and in your beauty. And then I also want to be pragmatic and say, this is not really the time to do elective surgeries. This is not the time to go get a facelift.
And I love that you're bringing in money too, because like Venus, yes, rules our relationships. It rules our loves, our self-love, our love of others, and like the friendships we want to bring in, our romantic partnerships we want to bring in, all of which can come under reconsideration. And then money as well. I was going to mention, you said not good time to start relationship. And I would imagine probably not the best time to start a new investment either. Whether that be for an elective surgery or for a home or anything you're putting a lot of money into. And I think that this can feel hard during a Venus retrograde because Venus is in such close proximity to us. The urgency around Venetian matters makes us almost want to like crave that even further. And it's going to take the awareness to remember, oh yeah, I'm actually trying to work on this reworking, this renegotiation, discover what I've learned in the past and bring that wisdom into the future.
I think it's super fascinating because if you think about Venus's retrograding in the sign of Aries, which is naturally ruled by Mars. Did I lose anybody on that? But when now we're in the sign of Mars and it's in Venus retrograding, right? Because Aries is ruled by Mars. Now we've got an aggression to us. Like there's something, like you said, impatient, urgent, aggressive, assertive. It's boom, right up front. And so I also want to say that now we have the beautiful warrior. And so now we're sort of in Athena's territory. And it might be women, it might be the women in your life or women, but really standing up or fighting for women. And you might even see women sort of stepping up to fight the good fight in their life, whatever it is. For example, it could be something very personal. If you're in an abusive relationship with somebody who is trying to dominate you or snuff out your power, this might be a time when you, in your grace, in your hopefully Venus way, you stand up to that person who's trying to dominate you, or the systems and structures that are trying to hold you back or hold you down.
I love that you brought up Mars as well, because Mars is indicative of cutting too, right? That cutting away with Mars. And so it can truly be in with grace, like you mentioned, with a Venetian grace, but how could you maybe do some, here's the magic element, right? Cord cutting, cutting away the things that no longer serve you, the relationships that are no longer working, cutting out the bullshit. Right? Like it's time to cut that out and use some of that Mars energy to your benefit, like Athena, right? Thinking through the strategy of what is getting in the way of me progressing toward what I really desire, what I really want. And I love that you brought up women as well, because I think that as women, we take on a lot, a lot of responsibility, a lot of managing of relationships. And we may see that really emphasized with women saying, okay, enough is enough. We're ready to cut away what we're no longer willing to invest our time and energy in.
One of the things that I found really interesting, I just read this in some article, but I think I read that women were allowed to become a bartender when Jimmy Carter was president. I was like, seriously? And then women were only allowed to own their own home in the 70s. I never knew that. I had no idea of that. And so I do wonder if in some way this is like reevaluating women's worth, or the women in your life that are important in your life, really seeing their value. Sometimes we wake up late to the value of our mom's care, and sometimes we never even see it. But this is a time when you can really see the worth of yourself, or the worth of your work. Now, back to money really quickly, we should say this. I was holding this thought in my head. It is a good time to save money, not spend all your money. Cawnawyn is right, where it's not necessarily the time to place a big bet or make a brand new investment, or I would even say buy a home. Or if you can, not get married at this time. If you do, you're going to live with it and you'll be just fine. But if you have the choice, I would choose to wait. There's a lot of fraud in money investments and money laundering and whatever. We won't go into all those rabbit holes, but I'm just saying there's a trickster quality. There's like hidden pieces to Venus in retrograde that you cannot see blatantly. They are evasive, and the truth can evade. So make sure whatever you're investing in is a genuinely good, smart, wise investment.
I was also going to mention too, just because like you brought up women like earlier with Venus, and one of the great examples we have of Venus retrograde happening with like a cultural shift for women is the Barbie movie came out during the last Venus retrograde, which happened during a Venus retrograde in a fire sign as well. So, and in that movie, she even goes through like her mental crisis, right? And so, what a beautiful example of culturally women coming into like a power and then also a reconsideration of their worth. And so, yes, I want to just reiterate, I think we've seen this in the past, culturally, women's issues come to the forefront. And I think that this will probably be no different, and potentially even more overt, more aggressive because of that Mars influence.
Yeah. And when it was in Leo, it was really, really creative. Not that Aries is not creative. Aries certainly can be creative, but Aries is brave and bold and outspoken and the trailblazer and the pioneer. So women are going to pioneer into, I don't know, the forefront of life in some way. We're going to see it. It's going to be really exciting. And I do think we will probably see it in the social culture too, like the Barbie movie. That was a great example. But let's talk about how this is going to also like meet up with Mercury going into retrograde. We have so many retrogrades, Cawnawyn, but let's talk about like Mercury in retrograde's pre-shadow starts on the day that Venus actually goes retrograde, right?
Yeah, isn't that wild? Like it's the exact same day. That'll be.
Are we going to be okay? Are we going to be okay? Can we do this? Right? Do we just?
I feel like we've lived through a lot. Like we've been primed, but this is a lot of Aries. Like,
yeah. No, we have stamina now. We've got stamina.
Well, and you know what I think is so interesting, just to touch on this really quick, because we've had our nodes, which we're going to talk about the eclipses, but we've had our north node now for the last year and a half has been going through Aries. And I find it so interesting that as it exits, now we have this emphasis of Aries with this Venus retrograde and this Mercury retrograde happening right at those degrees, just to sort of wrap up our story, like very retrograde, looking back at all we've learned, all the wisdom we've gained from this Aries archetype, and now really inviting us to step into that process.
One of the things that's also really fascinating, this is teeny weeny nuance. Okay. Like I do find it interesting on that day when Venus is retrograde, Mercury will sit at the 29th degree of Pisces. And so something's going to happen. And this is around that March 1st, March 2nd. Something's going to happen where you're going to have a big idea that has tons of value and meaning in it, right? Venus, the big idea, Mercury, it's going to be something that's going to probably be so inspiring because it's in Pisces. And then you're going to be so excited. And then it's probably not going to go, or it's going to have a setback, or it's going to stall out, or you're going to be driving down the freeway, metaphorically, in your big idea car, and you're going to get a flat tire. Some little glitch is probably going to thwart your big idea. And what I want to say is don't get discouraged. Just know you probably haven't thought about all of the aspects of this big idea, and you probably just need to rethink it, rework it, reflect on it a little bit longer. So when it does launch, it launches in a solid way. You're also going to see in society, failure to launch during this time.
And I think you mentioned the flat tire. Please be aware to check your tires before the Mercury retrograde as usual.
Yeah, especially when you're like headed to the airport and you don't have the 2 hours, you only gave yourself the 45 minutes and you're praying your bag can get on.
Which one is that? Is it Ivy or Aurora who's joined the chat? That looks like Ivy. Yeah.
Aren't that cute?
Such a sweetie. Well, and that can become such the trap with Mercury retrograde. It's so close to Earth. There's this urgency. We got to get to the airport. I left all the things to the last minute. We have to race. And then what ends up happening is the inevitable technical or physical difficulty arises. The obstacle ensues. The idea has a challenge that we didn't expect. And that's why I think it's so helpful to use the shadow period to recognize that whatever you're going through at that time, the planet's already traversing over those degrees. So in those weeks leading up to a Venus retrograde or a Mercury retrograde, it's important to remember that some of these issues that might be arising, or ideas or new ventures to go on, they're not going to be one and done. It's going to happen again and then again. So you can prepare yourself for those things by backing up your technology and making sure your car is in working order and making sure the people that you want to discuss a new idea with are on board and ready to go. Try to mitigate some of those challenges in those shadow periods beforehand. That's why we're giving them, and I'll put them on screen for us. That way we have them and you can prepare for these things well in advance of the retrograding. So when it comes, you're ready to go.
And so that first shadow is, for Mercury retrograde, it's the 1st through the 14th. And then on March 14th, it goes retrograde until, April 7th. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was when Venus and Mercury are in retrograde together, and when there's a conjunction, what happens is now the things that we value and our love relationships and the things that we love have communication breakdown. So this is when you can fight with somebody who you love or need or value. This is when your relationships need to maybe have a little bit more thoughtfulness around communication. This is when you can be gravely misunderstood. This can be when your communication style is too defensive or too offensive or doesn't hold the tenderness that it normally does. This can be when you spill the beans, when you say the wrong thing, when you say the thing that's cutting or a put down or an unintended hurtful comment, if you've ever done that, foot and mouth syndrome. And so this is like, really be careful with the way you use your words right now, especially with the things and the people that you love. Like, have really serious intention in your words and maybe slow down. And I also even think like talk therapy right now, if you're in a marriage counseling situation, you might discover the untruths, the things that were hidden, or the fibs, the fabrications, or the lies. You can find pain in this aspect. It doesn't have to be that way, especially if you're aware of it and and you just remember, okay, we're in a retrograde right now. Maybe I don't want to bring this whole conversation up. Maybe I don't want to confess all my sins to my partner right now at this time. Maybe I'll wait until after the shadow period.
This is why we're giving you the data up front. Have the awareness and use that to your advantage if that's not the time. And it's funny, Meredith, when we talk about magic in respect to the transits, I look at the elements a lot as just a basis. And we're having this transit happening through a fire sign and a water sign. And I feel like this only further emphasizes this Venus Mercury together, because if we think about what happens when Mercury's operating at a high speed in a fire sign, that's going to create a burnout, right? We've had actually all of our retrogrades operating through fire signs. And that's been something that I've been hearing from clients and friends, that like the burnout, because there's just so much going on, there's not enough energy to like maintain that level of fire during that time. And so we have the overexertion. And then also, because Pisces is being interacted with, we now also bring in the element of water, and that emotional miscommunication or that emotional unintegration together of these two energies. We have them going retrograde. So there's a backwards in the element of emotion, in the element of water. And so again, sort of lending to Venus, Mercury operating together, but not quite succinctly, it's going to be harder to navigate those things. And if you can operate with the awareness of not only grace for yourself to maybe wait to bring up certain elements, but also for others in this case to have the compassion of, maybe they said that and it's actually stemming from this deeper place. And I don't need to judge them on the surface level of their words, but how can I actually work with what they're truly saying and what's underneath the surface here?
Great point. We have to remember that this retrograde Mercury, this Mercury in retrograde is working with, it's going through Aries and back into Pisces. So from March 30th through April 7th, it's sitting in the Pisces portion. So on March 30th, it's going to feel a little different. It's not going to necessarily feel like how it felt when it was in the Aries energy. One of the things I want to say is on March 30th through April 7th, you watch the world become very, very confused. Like you can't see straight. It's in Pisces. So Pisces is like the fog. Like the fog, you can't even use a flashlight. Your headlights don't work. You can't see through fog, even with the light. And so there's a massive confusion around what's true, what's not true, what's a lie, what's false, what's real, what's not real, what's the dream, what's the reality. And so I just want to tell you that in that state of confusion, just take a deep breath, go slow. Like if you were walking through the fog in the forest, you would go really slow. You would walk kind of as if you were blind. You would feel for trees and branches. And so there's going to be sort of a massive confusion. Where are we going? What are we doing? This doesn't make sense. My goal doesn't make sense. If you're trying to write a book, you might be writing the beginning, the middle, and the end all at once. And it's hard to put it into chronological order because this is the opposite of Virgo. So there's not a lot of clarity. So I want to say, like, if you're in a tough relationship or partnership, business or romantic at this time, and you're in the Pisces part of this Mercury in retrograde, you might not be able to see the truth quite yet. You might be able to feel it though, because this is very intuitive. So these are your feelings, and this is your imagination, and this is your intuition and your psychic ability. So you might have a knowing that something's really, really off, but you might not be able to see it clearly or prove it. You might not be able to find the crime.
Of course, magically too, this invites so much, like if you can remember, I'm not necessarily going to try to pinpoint the clarity, but if you want to go into sort of a more meditative state, go into an imaginative brainstorming. Don't worry about getting all the paper right. Just do the rough draft and spill what's out of your mouth, right? Mercury in Pisces, when it operates here, this is music. This is how do we communicate with things that are other than words? And you have an opportunity to interact with that in a very dreamy way that can really yield just incredible results if you're not so caught up in the details of, am I getting it perfect? Am I getting it clear, right?
Cawnawyn, you are a songwriter, right? So sometimes do you write, I don't even know how to write music, but you write music and you write lyrics. Sometimes do you find yourself when you're writing the dream, because your music is so dreamy, everybody has to listen to her voice, her music. It is angelic. It is heavenly. It is so Pisces. It is so beautiful. I think they can go to cawnawynmore.com, right?
You are too kind, but yes. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing all of that. And yes, you can totally listen to my music on cawnawynmore.com. Thank you.
Well, look at all our instruments behind, right? But what I wanted to ask you was this. Have you ever written a song before where you wrote the ending before the beginning, but yet you didn't know it? And then when you put it all together, like it came in through your mind, it came channeled in a way that was out of order for you to later do your Virgo on it.
Okay, I love that you're asking this. Let me take this one step further because I actually, every year, Mercury will always go through Pisces. And the Pisces place in my chart, which by the way, if you don't have your chart, you should get your gorgeous natal chart and find out where all this Pisces and Aries is happening in your chart and really pinpoint it to how it might be affecting you. But because of where Pisces is in my chart, I actually plan every year when Mercury goes through Pisces to do a big songwriting session because I find it so inspirational, so generative of that imaginative work. And I'll tell you, like, as a songwriter, I don't think I ever write anything linearly. I always just have like poetry come out and then I have to reorder it with Virgo like days later. And that's how I usually write my music.
I love that. And so, you know what that invites our listeners to do is go and find in your gorgeous natal chart, go and find where you have 9 degrees Aries, and then go and look where you have 26 degrees Pisces. So in between the 26 degree of Pisces and the 9 degrees Aries is sort of this space where this Mercury in retrograde is going to take place. And I love what Cawnawyn said about how she plans out. She goes and looks in advance. When is Mercury going to hit her Pisces? Because that's literally the song inside your soul. But if you go look at that place in your chart where Mercury is retrograding, you're going to see the subject matters that is influencing that retrograde. So if you have that in the 8th house, your mind wants to go within and have a paradigm shift and transform and metamorphose into new beliefs. And if it's traveling into the 9th house, your mind wants to go into the dream of the highest version of yourself. And it wants to plan the travel. And so wherever you have Pisces, that's where you're writing the song of your soul. And when Mercury goes retrograde, it's a time of deep inner reflection, not necessarily a time to publish your work or put it out there in the world, but it's a time to rewrite it or write it or work it, find it within, but not necessarily a time to launch it, especially if Venus is retrograde as well. That's like a double whammy. So like write the music or find the music inside your soul, whatever that is for you. It might not be literally writing the music, but it might be living your dream or concocting your dream or journaling what your wish, your goal, your hope is for your life. What's your project? What's your dream project? And working it in your head.
Yeah, you'll want to find that house. And with Pisces energy there natally for you, you already have it in your natal chart. This area of your life might already look kind of different or imaginative or even unclear, right? Because Pisces is ruled by Neptune. It's a little muddier. That's why we were saying the miscommunication, the harder to navigate clarity when it comes to this Mercury in retrograde specifically. So this area of your life, this arena might already look like that. And this retrograde cycle is really inviting that integration, renegotiation with that sector of your chart. So it may even look more unclear. It may be just harder to pinpoint what the direction you would like to go into. So allow for the space for that to develop. It's nothing that's a marker of the value or the success that you have in this area. It can really be an invitation to say, I'm going to slow down and try and rework this section of my life and find the poetry in it, find the music in it, and be re-inspired during this time, because that's what a retrograde is inviting us to do.
Also, if you have this Venus, Mercury, or just Venus or just Mercury in retrograde in a water house, in a natural water house, so that's the 12th, the 4th, or the 8th house, this can be extraordinarily melancholy for you. This can be a time when there is even sort of a sadness over a loss of some sort. And the loss might have happened long ago, but it can be a memory of a loss. And I kind of want to say, especially if it's in a water sign house, the 12th, the 4th, or the 8th, It's almost like the mind doesn't necessarily want to think. It just wants to know. It's just like, I just want to know. I don't want to think. I don't want to do the mathematical calculus equation. I just want to know the answer. And so there's a deep relationship to just wanting to know through the intuition. And your knowing might really increase right now. But if you've got this Mercury, let's say in one of the jovial houses, which I consider the third, the fifth, and the ninth, sometimes the 11th. And so there might be a little bit more of an external expression with your Mercury in retrograde. You might experience this Mercury in retrograde kind of like a goofball. For example, let's say you get up to, I don't know, karaoke and you accidentally make a fool of yourself and then you turn into this adorable fool. Right? It's like, oh, my words didn't find me. There can be great laughter in this too. And it can even be a place of celebration if you don't play defense with life. Like if you don't get too devastated by the blips, the bleeps, and the blunders too. And if it's in an earth house, that would be the 2nd and the 6th and the 10th. It could be that your plans get thwarted and there could be a source of irritation, frustration that things didn't just go smoothly. And if it's in a fire sign house, the 1st, the 5th, or the ninth happens to be, and the 5th happens to be those joyful houses. But if it's in a fire sign house, there's a lot of passion. And you might feel like that passion is a volcano that hasn't erupted. So this passion is internal. This mental passion is inside of you. The slow cooker crock pot, right? You're like cooking this amazing concoction up that you will want to share with the world. But you might feel frustrated that it's not launching. It's not taking off.
And then Meredith, the air houses, right, as well, the 3rd and the 7th and the 11th. This could be a time, well, with all of that air and then also the water, I feel like this could be that clarity that we're searching for, in an air house would be a little bit muddled. And I think that could also cause an irritation as well, similar to what you said about the earth houses, where with so much like passion and emotion, like the air houses aren't actually necessarily wanting that. Like our 3rd house is trying to get somewhere and go something and share the thing. And when the words are coming out muddled, it can get very frustrating. That 7th house trying to relate to people on this, like how frustrating when all of the passion and the emotion is spilling out, but nothing's actually getting communicated, right? And then that can translate into that 11th house, reaching out to our hopes and dreams and wishes when all of that gets cloudy and mystified. Like it's hard to know where your bearings are. And I love that we went through all the houses, but I also, of course, want to invite everyone to watch the fabulous Connie Jo and Meredith collaboration that you guys are doing through all 12 of the houses. I know they're not all done yet. We're anxiously awaiting the next house, which I think is an air house, isn't it?
Yes, we have to do 3, 2, and 1. Thank you for the reminder. Under pressure, coming down on me, under pressure.
Indeed.
I'm not the singer here. The other thing is, I think that those air houses with this Mercury in retrograde. So if you have this in those air houses, those natural air houses, and we're talking about the natural zodiacal wheel. So the natural zodiac, we're not talking about your placement of Mercury. We're talking about where Mercury between 9 degrees of Aries and 26 degrees of Pisces falls in your chart. And if that falls in one of those air houses that Cawnawyn was talking about, I think that can be really anxiety inducing, like anxious mind. And so you guys really, because those are the houses that clip at a really fast rate, like you were saying, and it's like you just want to get stuff done. And they're kind of like on, mental high speed all the time. And now it's like walking through, walking through, I don't know, syrup. And you're going to be forced to slow down. And by the way, I don't want you to be forced to slow down from an accident, from, texting and driving and speeding and being late and eating lunch, eating your In-N-Out burger while you're texting, while you're driving with your knee.
Remember, folks, the urgency is a myth. It's not real. Like, try to breathe a little bit, which I know my Gemini hates it too.
I love that. And I love that you are learning that urgency, like we have to have it right now, is a myth, because don't you have a 0 degrees Mars in Gemini?
Oh, but nobody's counting that. It's a tough lesson. I'll tell you, it's not natural.
I know. That's why I said, like, if I was being a Virgo, this is what I would want to tell you. And that's the gift of astrology is it shows you what you are not. It shows you like what you need to grow. Like we all know over here at Soul Navigation that you can do, 3 million things within 1 second of time. But I like that you know not to.
All the archetypes invite all the journeys at all times. We don't do sun sign astrology over here. Is that right?
Okay, let's talk about the next biggie. And I had just done a video on this, and that is, the nodes are flipping into the next sign. I did a whole video on the meaning of this nodal change, this nodal axis change, moving into Pisces North Node and Virgo South Node, and I gave you very specific dates on when this is happening and how this is happening. And just as a reminder, I use the mean nodes. I follow the mean nodes, not the true nodes, and the true nodes and the mean nodes flip at different times. So you're going to want to watch that video because I talk for 1 full hour about the meaning of this. But we need to talk about this in context of the absolutely massive and unique eclipses that are happening. And Cawnawyn, do you want to talk about those eclipses, where they're happening in the chart and what they're bringing in for us?
Yes, absolutely. So we have our lunar eclipse. So this is our full moon on Virgo South Node happening at 23 degrees on March 13th. So that day, March 13th, the Virgo eclipse happening, lighting up our South Node. And 2 weeks later, on March 29th, we're going to have the solar eclipse happening. Now, this eclipse is happening in Aries. The sun will have moved into Aries. This is a new moon, but it's so close to that North Node that has just moved into Pisces that we're considering this an eclipse in Aries. And this is the very last eclipse that we're having in Aries. There are no more eclipses in Aries for another number of years. So kind of wrapping up a big story here, once again, highlighting this Aries and Pisces point. So both of these eclipses, oh my gosh, are massive. I really feel like this is our entrance into this new Pisces Virgo era, which of course Meredith talked about in her last video on this. Please go watch, that video for more of that. But that lunar eclipse, I really feel like the first one we're having with the South Node in Virgo is that sun just illuminating, okay, what really needs to shift here? We're moving away from that South Node energy in Virgo. So having potentially some of those default patterns that we've fallen into, that need for the, excessive organization and detail-oriented process or system that we're trying to create, really becoming a method of potentially self-sabotage or not acting, in our best interest, and us having that illuminated, hopefully not in too harshly of a way for you, but the full moon could really bring some realizations and potentially some losses around, I need to step away from this over anxiety around the process, the system, and move into more of this faith that things are going to work out okay, and have a little bit of a grace and a tenderness with yourself. So please be kind and gentle to yourself, because I really could see this as being a pretty harsh full moon, honestly, but also incredibly illuminating and helpful to hopefully move towards a little bit more grace for yourself.
Yeah. So on March 13th, really pay attention to where, and I'm sure you already have because you watched that video that I just did last weekend, where we really looked at where the nodes are in that Virgo South Node and that Pisces North Node in your chart. So you probably already know. And you do want to take into context what the nodes are bringing you now, because it's cataclysmic. This is like cataclysmic plate tectonics out there in the world of massive chaos, and within yourself, hopefully finding the serenity inside the chaotic world. But one thing that is fascinating is we've got Jupiter in Gemini, and it's squaring this nodal axis. And this nodal axis that is now in an eclipse on March 13th, dun, 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 write that in your journal, March 13th. And let's see what happens, because with Jupiter squaring it, it's going to feel like our belief systems, Jupiter, our optimism, our highest self is in tension with two opposing sides of the coin. I think that this can feel like a real division amongst people. And I think we're going to see a great divide around this time. And I think we could even see deep emotional losses, like a feeling of absolute sadness or feeling emotionally gutted, because that South Node in Virgo actually can be quite cruel. It can be so critical. And when it's in its shadow, so we look at the South Node in the shadow, in the darker expression of that sign, where Virgo can go when it is unhealthy is in such a critical anxiety inducing space. And it's in conflict. It's in conflict with the sun or the soul or the North Node, the higher self. And what is at stake? What you believe in. So this might be a time where you really lose faith in humanity, faith in society, faith in your loved ones, faith in your own self. But you're listening to this channel. So I don't want you to. I want you to hold on and keep the faith and remember that you have you. Now, what's really interesting about this is Saturn is sitting on the sun. That's also quite oppressive, suppressive, right? And it is very heavy. But this is what I want to say. It's super karmic. So I want you to be the person who practices enlightenment. You get into the mystical side of you. Do not allow yourself to be programmed from other people's thoughts, but I want you to lead with your heart, with like the deepest, most divine part of your soul. And remember that you have you. When you sort of surrender the ego and you step into your serenity and you are not willing to be sort of programmed, if you will, to think what I think or think whatever silo you're living in thinks. You know, if your parents want you to be a certain way, but when you stay to your authentic sense of self, what happens is you are stepping into the maturity of Sun conjunct Saturn. You're stepping into the wiser authority inside your own self, not from what somebody else says you should do or what you should be or how you should believe. But your belief system is going to be challenged right now. And it's going to take guts for you to stand in the truth of you with grace, you know, with the Pisces unconditional love. So it looks something like this: mom, dad, whatever, people out there in the world, whoever is trying to be the authority over you. I respect what you believe and what you think. And that is good for you. But I need to stand in my authentic truth right now. And I'm not, and then this is the subtext that you're going to say, and I'm not going to spin out in Virgo anxiety, and I'm not going to get overly emotional or defensive in the Virgo moon on the South Node. And so I'm choosing a different path. And this is the path I'm going to go. You can love me while I'm on this path, or if you need to take space from me because you don't like or approve of what I'm doing, then so be it. And that's sad. But I'm really going to step into my authentic truth. And that is Saturn claiming itself, Saturn Sun conjunction. You might have to remove yourself from people that you love that don't support you. That's that Moon South Node. And it's all in conflict with Jupiter, which is your belief system. So that was a lot to say. I just wanted to put it in really pragmatic terms. And you're going to see this also play out in the world out there, like on the global level, not just in your own life. But find the courage to gracefully stand in the authentic you and don't allow yourself to be repressed right now in your art or in your vision for your own life.
I love the way you wove all of those planetary archetypes into that like expression of that energy. Thank you for sharing the way you did that, because that was beautiful. And it really made me think about Saturn's influence as its archetype, where it can isolate us. Like, and you talked about that, where you're having to take that step back, that detachment, keeping in mind that during this time, it really may make you feel like, even in that example, like, wow, I'm really all by myself. I can't even rely on my parents because they're going through whatever that is. And I'm trying not to get into the anxiety of whatever they might be going through. And that can feel very isolating. So having the compassion with yourself too, to take that space and know that you're not alone, but that you are observing this from a larger standpoint, from a more masterful viewpoint, where you're seeing all the different energies at play. And that might interact with that Jupiter in such a way that reforms some of your own beliefs around how the people around you are relating. Jupiter in Gemini, right? How are these people talking to each other? You're seeing the subtext, like Meredith was talking about. You're seeing that inner story come to light. The other thing I wanted to mention too, which you also touched on, was that Pisces Virgo axis is that axis of service, and not letting the anxiety of that Virgo archetype pull us into having to save everybody and fix all the problems and mess with the structures. And remembering we also don't have to make ourselves a martyr in this, and that's Saturnian isolation. But really, how can we serve a greater purpose here in the compassion, and not just for others, right? And what they're going through, but ourselves. How can we have that compassion of self to serve a greater purpose here and maybe not get as involved, so we can conserve our energy and allow for better opportunities to come our way, and invest the time and energy into that, which I would definitely recommend, because Meredith, as we saw with the dates, this eclipse happens the day before that Mercury retrograde happens. So it's really like catapulting us into now this whole mercurial retrograde era, like this chapter that we're going to be in.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think that this is a time where you really can go within to find, like, where are you the authority in your own life? You know, where are you the leader? Where are you the mentor? And I'm asking that for real. Like, leave in the comments, what are you good at? What are you leading? And even if you're listening to this at 16 years old, if you feel like I'm not a leader anywhere, well, where would you like to lead? You know, because that Saturn and that Mercury in retrograde is going to sort of have you reevaluate that piece of you, because that Saturn is on your soul. So it's sort of like stepping into your bigger shoes, and then going into Mercury in retrograde with Venus in retrograde. Now you're literally reworking the entire value system that is inside of you. You're maturing yourself. You're stepping into your wisdom. You're not allowing other people to tell you who you're gonna be in this lifetime. And you're choosing where you're gonna lead. And we need leaders. We need you to lead. We need you to lead in the spaces and places that you are really good at. And you'll want to, probably, but not when Mercury's in retrograde. You're just gonna, again, concoct the dream. But Cawnawyn, so I did this exercise, and I'm wondering if you have another exercise in magic, but I want to tell you this one thing that I did that reminds me of this transit. So a really, really long time ago, I was actually living in Georgia at the time. So this was many, many years ago. And this is like naughty because I littered. Yeah, I know, it's bad.
Uh-oh.
I committed the sin. So I don't really want every single 100,000 people out there littering like this. It would be terrible. But I did do this. And so I wonder if there's like another like environmentally friendly way to do this. I'm sure there is. But what I did was, because this is a full moon, right? We just have to remember flat out, this is just a full moon. So we need to get rid of the things that are not supporting our belief systems, that are not supporting our value, that are not supporting the love that's in our heart. This is a full moon. And so we want to eliminate those things that don't support us. So what I did was I made a list. And at this time, I needed to get rid of a relationship in my life, a romantic relationship. So I wrote on this piece of paper, you know, remove this person from my life and have them never return, and leave me only with good memories. And, you know, just basically a sayonara note. So I then folded it and I tore it up into 100 little pieces, and I put it in the palm of my hand. And then I drove really fast down a dirt road. So there was a lot of dust and dirt. It was really dramatic and kind of fun. And I was starring in my own cinematic feature film. But then I was driving down the dusty road, and I rolled down the window and I let all the pieces of paper fly, and I watched them fly in my rear view mirror in the dust. And they looked literally like doves because I folded them. I don't know how to say it, but I tore them in a way where they like could flap open, and they all look like little doves. And it was literally bye-bye. And that relationship left me, thank God, because it was not a healthy one. And I was very young. I also felt the healing freedom of taking my power back, because that person was so manipulative and toxic, and sort of like tried to blackmail me in it, and tried to like overexpose me to people. It was just really a kind of not a healthy, I was not in a healthy state of mind at the time. And I had not yet found astrology. So this was my pre-astrology life. That was a great exercise. I don't know how I could make that more green, you know, more environmentally friendly. But do you have an idea?
Well, of course. And first of all, I want to tell you, I was at the edge of my seat with your magical retelling cinematic moment of you and your liberation. Like, bravo. Look at you, witch. Like, come on.
Can I be in the club?
You are my club. You're the whole club. Like, I see you every week. So, so in terms of ideas of making it like a little bit healthier for the environment to spread everything, right? We can write on pretty much any surface. So I would take just like leaves, right? We know leaves are going to biodegrade, and you could spread the leaves out your window that way. And then it's also integrating with that earth energy, which I so recommend working with earth energy because it is a Virgo moon. So it's an earth moon. How can you integrate some of that earth? Also, if you find something that is safe to bury as well, maybe far away from you, of course, you want to be mindful of the environment and what you are burying, but you want to make sure that it will biodegrade safely. If you want to work with the water element, of course, too, because Pisces is here, another one you can write on and get rid of is just write on some toilet paper and flush that sucker down the toilet. We do that all the time, right?
Wow, Cawnawyn, I love that. Okay, I didn't even think of the leaves. Now you have to remember that I was in my 20s, and this is before astrology, and this is before like we were even thinking about these things, and I was like littering paper. I know I'm gonna get people mad at me on this channel. You guys, it was a really long time ago. Okay, it's disintegrated by now, but I love the idea of leaves, and I live. You and I both live in like the forest. There's so many different leaves. What would I write on the leaf? Can I use like a Sharpie, or is that bad? That's probably bad.
I mean, you could, I honestly, it's in the grand scheme of things, I know witches everywhere are using all kinds of pens or methods. You could use a type of charcoal, right? That would be a good one because that's made from fire. Also, even adding
Ooh,
in that environment.
my daughter's charcoal pencils from her sketch pad book thing.
Well, there you go. Yeah. You can make that. You could write it in water also. Like if you really want to make sure nothing is going to be out there. I know in many cases we use paper, we use ink, right? But you want to be mindful with the awareness. Like that's where the responsibility comes in. So I love that you're bringing this up to care for our beautiful Mother Earth, especially where you and I live. Like think of the elemental power that you have, right? You can use water or fire or forms of that to interact with this energy and then dispose of it or inflame it and light it up or bury it and make it a time that can last, and provide a foundation. All of these elements work with magic in such an integral way. Our ancestors have been doing this for so many thousands of years. So using that as a guideline for not only creating your magic, but keeping it within safety of the environment itself is so important. And
I love that. And I still like the idea of like the charcoal pencil on the leaf, if I could make it right, my ideas, because I want to blast the music, Dust in the Wind. It's a really old song.
We got to play Gold Blessed Woman now in the background.
And I like the cinematic feature film part where it's like dusty back there and blah, and I'm leaving them behind.
I love
it feels like the I don't know, the power of using the wind, to create, like, I like seeing it dissipate for a long time.
I am seeing you in your Sag element and I'm living.
Like, I don't know if one flush down the toilet is going to give me the impact that I want,
Well, the impact is so important, like that feeling. And in fact, like even before you do any of the magic, if you can sit in that I think is even something the Pisces is sort of inviting us to merge with, is the experience of what is it going to feel like to let this go, like for real, that liberation. And then whatever you can do in that process to like really motivate that, like getting in the car and throwing the dust behind you and throwing those leaves and watching them dissipate. Like there's magic in that, and feeling that, embodying it and merging with it. That is what makes magic work, first and foremost. And secondly, that is what the universe is inviting of all of us. How can you merge with that feeling that you're aching for, that you're longing for?
That was a true feeling of liberation. And by the way, I didn't look like that. I just looked in the rear view mirror like,
she's moving forward, baby.
I was only
got time for going back.
I was only looking forward. Anyways, let's talk about the new moon.
Okay.
Okay, it's at the end of March. We have to wait all the way to the end of March, and we're having our new moon solar eclipse. And it's interesting, though, and I want you to tell all of our listeners why this is interesting, because the solar eclipse with the node, the sun and the moon, they're all in this really interesting configuration, but it's still a solar eclipse.
Right. And it's so close to that Pisces North Node. So we are getting a bit of that. But I really feel like this, I've been reminded actually of Benjamin Button through a lot of these like transit conversations, because if we think about Aries, Aries is the beginning. It's that seed that sprouts, right? And it gives us that new hope. But this Aries solar eclipse is the final one that we're having in this axis. So there's a wrapping up to it. And isn't it funny how similar the like life and death that we have in the very beginning of our lives, how dependent we are, like right after birth, and how that mirrors so much of the end of our lives where we are so dependent on our loved ones. And I feel like so much of this, where is the beginning, where is the end, is really being brought up with this, because a new moon is the beginning of a cycle. But once again, we are wrapping up this Aries story, and we are going through these retrograde motions at this time. What are we starting and what are we ending? And as we all know, that, you know, every ending is a new beginning. So I really feel like this energy is being called up in this. And not only is it being called up here, but every one of these transits is happening over this 0 degrees point. So I really think that this new moon holds this whole conversation of beginning and ending in that place in your chart, in that house that this is happening for you, and is inviting you to step into this rebirth. But this rebirth may require a sacrifice or a loss or a giving up or stripping away to step into a more powerful version of self. And if we think about the Aries archetype of that warrior, right, of really stepping into like being on the front lines of something, being passionate and invigorated for a new beginning, like what has to be let go of in order to move into this? I'd be so curious what your thoughts are on this.
Aries loves the new moon more than any other sign, because Aries energy is really synonymous with new moon energy. And so it likes to be bold. It likes to take risks. It likes to be born again. It likes to have a rebirth. It likes new adventures, you know, new, and me. And it is really comfortable in its new moon. And I like how you were talking about how this is the last eclipse in this pair of signs, Aries and Libra. We're finishing that up. And I think that's very important that you said that, because it works in an echo chamber. Where in your life have you been being bold? Where in your life have you been being a warrior? Where in your life have you been on the front lines, like Cawnawyn said? You know, where have you been doing that? And this is sort of like your last big chance, if you will, to make a statement in that arena. So where does Aries, and it looks like it's very interesting. I would say anywhere between 0 degrees and 15 degrees. So Mercury is at 0 degrees on this eclipse. It's in retrograde, but it's at 0 degrees Aries. So your mind is just explosive, expansive. It wants to create new things. It wants to blaze new trails, maybe on the same theme that you've been working on, but it wants to do wherever you have been bold before, where you've been taking risks, whatever projects you've been tackling and taking on for the last year under these eclipses. It wants to do more of that in a different, new, bigger way. For me, this is in my house of career. It's playing out exactly like this. I mean, almost verbatim, because I'm changing the way that I approach my work through teaching in my international workshops now. And it's really, really exciting. So that's where this shows up for me. So think about where 0 degrees to 15 degrees Aries is in your chart. The mind is at that most powerful degree. I hope you guys watched the Power of the Degrees video that I did. And I talk about the 0, the 15, and the 29th degree. This is massive energy for anything new you want in your life. However, because that Mercury is still in retrograde, it might have a little bit of a failure to launch, but that doesn't mean you can't dream the dream. And that doesn't mean that you can't manifest. That doesn't mean you can't raise your vibration to the level that it needs to be at to receive the glory that you are seeking, the glorious goodness that you're seeking. I would say take a look at what house this is playing at, because the house is absolutely critical, because it's going to show you the theme in which this is the touchstone for. So if this is in your fourth house, this is about your heritage, maybe your family, maybe your mother, maybe a new house for you. You know, if this is your sixth house, you might be changing out your daily work and how you approach daily work. But it's like a brand new beginning on a theme that you've already been dancing to for the past year.
I would also invite people to look back at previous Aries eclipses to see how this happened for you in the past, especially the solar eclipses that would have been going on a year ago or even 2 years ago, to see, you know, where are some themes here. And remembering too that eclipse energy is about, like, this, in this case, it's a solar eclipse, the sun being eclipsed. So there may actually be an element here of something being hidden, like truly eclipsed by something larger, or we may see in the collective, oftentimes this can be sudden rises or falls to power too. I would encourage you, wherever you're looking at all the things that Meredith beautifully laid out, you know, in that section of your chart, is there also a hidden story here? Is there something not being said? What needs to be pulled out from that? Again, bringing up that subtext that we were talking about earlier, because with the awareness of that, there's a bigger picture here. And while the Aries energy wants the new and start and the beginning and let's hit the restart and do it all over again, right? There is something that is at risk of being overshadowed or eclipsed. So making sure you have the awareness to get that full picture and be able to progress forward with this, you know, retrograde happening, all of this thinking that you're doing at the same time. There's so much to consider here, my gosh. And I just feel like this is just all happening in such a concentrated place in the chart.
It's a giant stellium. I like that you touched on that, because sometimes we're going through, okay, so sometimes under eclipses, you can lose things. Your partner can come to you and say, you know, I'm no longer happy in this relationship. And that feels like not a new beginning. That feels like a loss to you. And when you watch my Pisces Virgo nodal access shift video that I just did last weekend, I talk a lot about this. And in truth, that might actually be a new beginning for you if you do step out of your partnership, or if things do leave you, or if you are being eclipsed in some way. Just remember, you haven't yet seen the blessing. Like, there is, keep your faith. There is usually profound reasons, and there's silver linings. We just can't see them when it happens, when it's right here and when it's happening at first. Sometimes it takes a little distance to be able to see, why is this loss happening? Oh, this loss really was actually the birth of me, or the birth of something new. It's really hard to take those losses though, but it is true, because this is an eclipse. Things can leave your life that are not supposed to be. I've said this before in some of my other videos. Like, I thought I was really launching into a new form of astrology work when I launched that television pilot with the murderers, and that didn't launch, you know, failure to launch. And so I really had to reflect on that and find the silver lining in the lost opportunity, because that didn't come to fruition. And now, a year later, literally a year later, and I filmed that on Eclipse, by the way, I see the blessing in that not actually coming to fruition. There's 1,000 blessings in it, right? Wow, it really sort of requires removing the ego and coming from a deeper place, the soul or the heart. Should we talk about the next?
The big one that is going to get us very integrated with this Aries new beginning energy as well.
On March 30th, we have this really big deal with Neptune, which I love Neptune. Like, I had so much fun teaching my Neptune workshop in Spain. And if you guys have not seen that, you can go buy that entire day's worth of Neptune information, but it was so magical. Like, I can't even put words to the Neptunian love and transformation that occurred inside that workshop. But you can go purchase that if you really want to know about Neptune. But this is so massive, because Neptune's going to sit at the 0 degrees of Aries on March 30th. So it's moving out of Pisces and into Aries. And this is so big. Do you want to take a bite out of this, like, giant pastrami sandwich?
Coming at me with the Aries challenge. Thank you. I accept. Because, yeah, oh my gosh. I mean, if we think about it, Neptune's been in Pisces since 2012, really re-envisioning that whole Pisces archetype. And now we're stepping into this entirely new era. And not only is it a new era in a new zodiac sign, but if you consider that 0 degrees Aries is the beginning of the entire zodiacal wheel. So we're having this enormous birth point, and now Neptune brings its energy, this dream, this fantasization, this like glamour, frankly. Like it's gonna put the spotlight on, but it's not just the spotlight. We have the rose-colored glasses on with the spotlight, with the fog, with the music, with the sparkles, all on Aries. Oh my gosh. And what does that even mean? Like, well, first of all, we've been like all through March, we've been getting this like Aries energy stirred up. And now Neptune's coming in, slowly moving in on that 30th, the day after that eclipse, to say, here's Aries.
I love it. Cawnawyn, all I need is the fog machine and the glitter.
I know, we're almost there. We're so close. We need some fireworks every now and then too, like some little atomic bombs in the background. I'll get working on that. Now we're taking this Aries archetype, right? And we're going to be re-envisioning what this looks like over the course of the next 10, 12 years, like we've done with our previous. And so when we think about what is Aries, what does this stir up for you? What does this bring up for you? When I think of Aries, I love the Fool card energy in association with Aries, where it's that new beginnings, step off and like, I don't care what the consequences are, here I go. And we need that energy, that fresh, like let's just do it anyway, because those pioneers are what start such incredible eras and chapters for all of human history. But then we also think, okay, this is a Mars ruled sign. So we have the element of the hero or the warrior or the one at the front, lines, like I mentioned earlier. This is the person who is not looking behind them. They're saying, I'm headed forward with my path, my journey, my independent spirit is what fuels me. And so now we have Neptune bringing us this whole new vision of what this looks like in a modern era. And while that might stir up some feelings of real encouragement and excitement in some of us, maybe some of our air and fire signs who enjoy that level of passion and invigoration, it might also cause some of us to go, well, wait a minute. Some of that Aries energy is a little bit off-putting, because this can also be the macho man. This can be somebody who is incredibly aggressive and over passionate, over exaggerated, just like in your face, like I'm going to do it my way and I don't give a damn, right? And maybe that's not what we feel like as a society we want to move toward right now. Maybe that's giving some of us pause. And what I've been saying with this whole Neptune shift is like Neptune muddies and makes murky and blurs. So anything we can be doing, especially in this retrograde period that we have preceding this, with these eclipses happening, to get really clear on like, what are the aspects of Aries? And gosh, please watch all of Meredith's beautiful videos she's done on Aries, like the Aries sun, the Aries moon, the Aries placements that you have in your chart, Aries Venus, Aries Mars, right? All of these videos can lend an idea to, well, how am I integrating Aries into my life? How am I responding to that? And get really clear on what parts of that archetype you want to see blossom, that you want to see grow to something new and have a more beautiful vision of, and maybe the parts of it that give you pause and make you reflect and realize like, I'm not going to take that, because Neptune is putting on all of our rose-colored glasses and saying, don't you think that this could solve everything if we all just like bring on this archetype? Don't you think that like we should all move in this direction? And I don't want people to get hoodwinked. I don't want people to get mystified and led down a fraudulent path, right? Because I think that can happen with Neptune. But Mary, I'd be so curious what you think.
Oh my gosh. Well, you actually reminded me of Richard Gere in Chicago, razzle dazzle me.
Razzle dazzle, razzle dazzle. Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I look great.
Oh God, the razzle dazzle, right? But I say this is really pick your adventure. And like Cawnawyn said, this is the 0 degrees of Aries. So this is spring equinox degree. This is literally the very first breath of the whole entire zodiac, with the 29th degree of Pisces being the last degree. The 29th degree of Pisces is the last degree, and it bumps right up to the 0 degrees of Aries. So it's a real passing the baton of what Cawnawyn said of this Neptunian era since 2012. Here we are in 2025, and it's a new you. It is the hero's journey. And guess what? Guess what? It's so exciting. You're the hero. So pick your journey, pick your adventure. What do you want to do? What do you want to do with the dreams that live inside of you, with the Neptunian part of you? And I just can't recommend enough truly, deeply, deeply getting in touch with and understanding what Neptune is and what Neptune means in your chart. It is like my very favorite part of the whole entire chart. Again, you can buy that workshop in my shop, shopsoulnavigation.com. But I want you to get in touch with it because I want you to light your fire when this thing goes off. And so this is like the artistic beast inside of you. This is the creative maverick that lives inside of you. So what do you want to create? Even if you're not a creative person, even if you're not a singer, dancer, razzle dazzle me, what do you want to create? Is it a garden? Is it a project? Is it a business? Is it a relationship? Is it love? Is it a mission? Is it a calling? What do you want to create? Because Neptune, when it is channeled in its highest form, is literally the divine love that you are made of. And when that divine love has rocket fuel and ignition that can launch you so powerfully into the world, this is the day, this is the time to create your dream, to create the dream team that lives inside of you. You are the dream team. And so I love that. So in a way, it is kind of wear the rose-colored glasses, like be idealistic about what it is you want. Because what do they say? If you shoot for the moon, you'll hit the stars.
Right. Exactly.
Right. It's like shoot for the moon. So where do you want to shoot for the moon? What giant thing do you want? Do you feel inside of you? And it could be something that's just very, very simple, like pretend this is not my life, but I'm a grandmother for the first time. I want to do that. I want to be remembered for being the best grandmother in the entire world. And that's my mission. That's a glorious, gorgeous mission. This doesn't have to be that you want to be Ariana Grande in Wicked. It doesn't have to be the razzle dazzle. It just has to be deeply meaningful, spiritually meaningful for you. But I would say it should be passionate, where you feel passion, where you have a bold desire. Not a meek desire, not like, oh, okay, I'll do it. No, this is like where do you feel like unstoppable? Because this is going to be the champagne cork popping out in your life, but you are the champagne cork and the champagne. And so what are you going to do with this next decade with yourself? What are you going to do? There's so many comments. I want to hear your comments. I want to know where your placements are. I want to know where 0 degrees Aries is in your chart, because that's where Neptune is ingressing. We call it ingressing when it moves into the next sign. And it's like, bye-bye Pisces. And it's like, bring it on, like game on. Also, I want to tell you, because Aries is very competitive. So this could be a competition. This could be in the sports arena or the cooking arena. I mean, maybe you're going to be the next contestant on Beat Bobby Flay. That could be this, or maybe you're going to be the next, I don't know, Travis Kelce, or maybe not. It might not even have the razzle dazzle to it, but there's something where you are going to invite becoming your very best self in a very profound and divine way. Like your gifts or your talents or your love or your energy is just dropped down into you to be expressed. And I cannot wait to find out what it's going to be. What's it going to be? What's it going to be? What are you doing with your life?
What are you doing? I love that we're using mission too. I feel like Richard Gere in his suit just got like the football lines.
Yeah, exactly.
But mission is such a Martian word, like very Aries-esque, and you can't really have a meek mission. You can't have like
No.
this is my mission. No, like mission is very focused, very driven forward. And that is precisely like what we're all being invited to come up with. What's your mission? And if you rewind this video to earlier when Mare was talking about Saturn, okay, and becoming a leader. Aries is a leadership energy. They are willing to stick their neck out there and do the brave, hard thing. So if we're already working with like, well, what kind of leader do I want to be? What kind of authority do I want to have in my life? This is your ticket to like actually realizing that.
Yeah, this is a big year. This 2025 is a year where we're really rewriting the story. One of the things that I think is very, very fascinating is sometimes you can look to the past to find the story that you want to write, because there's a lot of beauty in traditions. And sometimes your story is unknown to you because the future wants to write it. And different signs do it differently. Like I think a lot of Aquariuses write their future story. And I think a lot of Cancers absolutely find their past story succulent, savory and delicious. And so it's really interesting. Like, where's your story going to come from? And some people are really good at the present. And so like, what's your attachment to the past, the present, or the future when you are blazing your trails and writing your Neptunian story? Neptune is the higher octave of Venus, and Neptune is that unconditional love, that divine channel. Neptune is when the heavens part and the angels show their faces to you and sing, and you're just frozen in awe. Where in your life are you channeling that energy? I get that from working with my students and my clients. I mean, that's a deep personal awe for me. Where do you get that, Cawnawyn? You do so many Neptunian things.
I think music is definitely a big one where it paints that image, like you hear the angels sing. And
yeah. Do you go away? I think you go away into like another ether zone when you sing.
I mean, I personally would say that you kind of elevate into the space, right? If you're using like just the breath work involved in singing kind of takes you into a meditative space, right?
Yeah. And it's also like a abdomen core workout.
Oh, for sure.
That's why you have great abs, because you're a singer.
Well, and I'm a pole dancer.
Well, we weren't going to talk about that, Scorpio.
Well, why not?
It is Mars. That is very actually Mars and Neptune. Pole dancing.
Totally.
All the aerial
fog and the light and the music. Yeah.
Yeah. The aerial acrobatics.
Oh,
my friend, this was so fun. Okay, those were just 4 little tiny transits that we wanted you all to know about. I hope you'll rewind this and write down the dates and do some wonderful magic with these transits. Don't be too afraid. The world might look scary and it might feel scary, but inside of you, it's not. It's beautiful.
You can find such magic in all of what's being offered here. And that's really what I would hope people can walk away with is this is an invitation to be reborn in an area of your life that you've been craving it and desiring it.
Yeah. And maybe even an area in your life that you have not yet discovered. Because remember when the pioneers left New York and they got in those covered wagons, they were told they were coming to something real, real great. They had no idea what was waiting for them. No idea. And so you're kind of like walking into the fog.
Truly. How utterly Neptunian.
Right. I think we should say it better. You're walking into the mists of Avalon.
Ooh, yes. That feels exciting. Now we really are on a hero's journey.
Yes, we are. And that's mandatory reading, everybody. The Mists of Avalon. That was my favorite book like 20 years ago.
Yes, Avalon is magical. Oh, this was so fun. Thank you for having me to discuss these incredible transits. My gosh, this has just been wonderful. So thank you.
I'm so glad I do have you. You just are one of the biggest loves in my life, and I adore you. And thank you for being here with me. Such a joy.
I love you, Mare. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Take care.